To summarize, again, that gospel very briefly, Jesus says this temple that you admire with the beautiful arches and the stained glass and the art will be destroyed. Then there will be many years of wars, insurrections, famines, plagues, portents, floods, wildfires. But before all of that, you will be arrested and persecuted, and some of you will be put to death. You will be hated, but you will not perish. Instead, you will gain your souls through endurance. It's not the most positive of gospel messages, not the most cheerful, but it is perhaps one of the most grounded in what life is actually like, especially for those who are persecuted. One of my proofs, and I don't need any more proof, but one of my proofs that Jesus really is God and is through some of the things he says. This message, which was said in around 30 or 30, 32, whatever, this message speaks of things to come, portents, plagues, famines, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And then he says, but before all of that, you who are serving me, you're going to have horrible things happen. It's a gospel that speaks to the centuries and the millennia ahead. He was speaking with the voice of God, saying, it's always going to look like this. It's always going to look like this. And if you are following me, you ought to at times be hated for what you're doing as you testify. Now, notice that Jesus doesn't offer much consolation to those who are going to suffer. What he says, by way of consolation, in the beginning of it is, he says, the persecution is going to give you an opportunity to testify, and don't even plan what you're going to say, because I will give you the words and the wisdom that they will not be able to contradict. He is speaking to people who are going to be persecuted, but he's also speaking to people who have some level of privilege in society, who aren't used to being persecuted, who are the well-educated, the well-fed, the well-housed, and saying, get in the game. When there is a malicious authority like the Roman Empire or any other empire at work in society, you are going to go before kings and governors. We live in a time in which the leaders of our own country persecute indiscriminately. They persecute their perceived enemies. They persecute black people like they always have in this country. They persecute Latino people like they always have in this country. They persecute Asian people like they always have done in this country. They persecute women and girls, 14, 15 years old. They persecute immigrants, women, children, men from all over the world. They persecute people of other nations, blowing up their boats without a declaration of war or any actual proof that they have the right to kill them. At times, our political leaders are blatantly lawless, that is, ignoring the law, saying, I'm above the law, ignoring court orders. And so, when our kings and governors are ignoring the laws of the land, they are lawless. The law that we depend upon for civility and kindness in society, then it's our job as the church to hold them accountable according to the law we're responsible for enforcing, God's law. Now, the good news for you is you don't need the whole Torah, right? When people say, when teachers and lawyers said, you know, what again does God want us to do? He sums it up in 2 laws, and I know you know them. You will love God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, and your mind. Now, I thought a lot last night, like, what does it mean to love God with my strength? I mean, you know, I've given you, I'm paying attention to you. But then I realized, when times are like this, it takes strength to keep holding on to God. Because you're either going to say, come on, God, get with it, you do it. Or you're going to say, God, I need to hide right now because I don't really have the strength to handle all of this, and I don't know what to do, so I'm going to try to get my citizenship in Italy or something like that. It takes strength to love God. And then Jesus says, and the second law is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That would be all neighbors, the persecuted and the persecutors. the immigrant who has been separated from her children and won't see them for another 30 years as she's dumped in Tijuana, and the sexual traffickers. Love your neighbors. That each neighbor has the image of God in them, and the people who are the bullies in the schoolyard are the people who had that image squashed out of them. But it's not dead. They still have that. So here's the challenge. We have to love those people too. Now, Jesus says that the second law is like the first because he's essentially saying you can't possibly be loving God if you're not loving everyone else, because God is in everyone and everything. And so if you're not loving the politician you hate, or the person who's throwing a protester down on the ground and stomping on her phone, if you're not loving that person, you can't really be loving God. Now, I call this really tough love, because tough love means holding children or addicts accountable and so on, but really tough love is loving everybody as you love God. If we abuse people verbally, physically, wish for their destruction, try to detain them or deprive them, we are not loving God. So when political leaders are loveless and dishonest and cruel and malicious, we have to respond with love. And we heap that love over their head with burning coals, as Paul says in Romans. Paul talks in the letter of Romans about what it is to live under a hostile state. And some people quote chapter 13 and say, see, you have to obey the ruling authority. But if you read that chapter very carefully and keep reading on, he says something about malicious authority, and he says, you are going to heap love over their heads like burning coals. You are not going to let them ignore you. You're going to stand in front of them, and you're going to say, I love you, and you're going to stop it, and you're going to stop it right now. And they'll put you in jail, and then the next row of people is going to say, I love you, and you're going to stop it right now. And then they're going to put those people in jail, and then so on. Because at a certain point, they will not be able to fight it. This is how all major movements against evil regimes have succeeded. To take it back into history, to make it a little bit easier so we have to talk about today's news, the movement that Gandhi inspired, starting in South Africa and then in India, to move the British Empire out of India and to return that country and its economy back to the poor workers of that country. It was done slowly over time. It took decades, and it was done with love. He insisted that they love each other as they were doing this work. You convince corrupt parties through constant testimony and resistance that they must cease their corrupt practices and leave. There are clergy in Chicago right now getting arrested in front of the Broadview Detention Center, and all they're doing is standing and praying. They're not even blocking the entrance, God bless them. They're simply standing and praying and getting arrested. But if you keep doing that, eventually the masks are going to come off, and the bulletproof vests are going to come off, and they're going to stop doing it, because we're going to insist with love, we're going to resist with love, and we're going to persist with love. It's like water wearing down a stone. It doesn't look like it's doing it, and all of a sudden, the stone is gone. It's a love that insists that the evil actions stop instead of condoning them or hiding until the evildoers go away. The challenge with the privilege that privileged people have is that it's so easy for us to hide. It's so easy for us to say, it's bad right now, maybe it'll be better in a few years. I'm just going to keep my head down. And by the way, the stock market's doing well. It's a love that bears with the negative consequences of helping the persecuted, standing between the persecutor and the persecutor. Because as Jesus points out, this kind of love should be getting us in trouble. And we persist. We keep going. Now, you might ask, as many people have asked me for months, but what can I do? What do we do specifically to resist and persist in love right now in our context? I would say first, we need to recognize our complicity, those who have privilege, especially white people, because this turmoil in our society is based on the two original sins of the 13 colonies: greed and out racism. They said we need a subclass so that we can get free labor, so we can get rich quickly. So we're going to say that black people are subhuman, not whole people. So we who are privileged must recognize how much we have benefited from the greed and racism that undergirds our society. Then we have to avoid hiding behind our privilege and remain engaged in resistance. The persecuted have no choice but to engage at all time. People of color in this country deal with racism every day. We only deal with it when we choose to deal with it, we who are white and privileged. Pardon me, I'm speaking for myself. We who are white and privileged choose whether to engage or not. So we have to persist in choosing. And that is why Jesus speaks about perseverance, because he knows it is a choice to engage over and over again. We really have to focus with loving God with all our strength. We call upon God's strength and wisdom and power to keep us in love with the image of God in all people. Because as soon as we've lost that, we become that which we abhor. Then I'd like to suggest we get involved with social action, and I have good news for you. We have a very active social action ministry at this church that is working on several types of advocacy for the persecuted. It also does a tremendous amount of outreach type, as in providing immediate aid in terms of food and clothing. But I'm going to ask Marty Devers to stand up. Marty is the head of our social action ministry, and Amy French is in charge of communicating to people. Here's what you do. In the Eagle, there's a thing that says, I want to be on the social action ministry's mailing list. Then you're going to get about 1 or 2 emails from Amy a week saying, here's what you can do. Then you're going to say to Marty, I would like to be involved, and Marty's going to send you postcards that you can send to people in the government who are or are not doing things that we really think are according to the law of God. So you can do it through the Eagle, or if you say, oh, I don't do email, then you can talk to Marty or Amy, and you can get involved with the social action ministry. You can call people. And you can offer protection to the persecuted. You can offer to take them to court. You can offer to shelter them. You can pray with them. You can send them to a safer place. All things that have happened through the social action ministry of this very church. And somebody laughed in the previous one, but I'm dead serious about us. Help us meet our pledge goals so that we as a church can be more generous in outreach than we have been in a while. We are by far one of the wealthiest churches in the Front Range, and yet we don't give nearly as much per person to the Front Range region and the needs of the region as other churches. And so I hope someday we will be able to commit more intentionally through our budget to outreach. And then finally, I do have some good news. I mean, this is all good news, right? This is all good news. But I want to say, take heart in Jesus' acknowledgement of how hard all of this is. It is hard if you are a loving, kind person to be in difficult environments. And he notices how much endurance he takes. He's saying, I know you get tired. I know this is hard work. Jesus could have walked away. The most privileged of human beings could have done whatever he wanted, but he always went down there and stayed with the people who are persecuted. So he knows what it's like. This is a marathon, this life as a Christian. But still, we must insist, and we must resist, and we must persist. Amen.